Welcome to Alien Whisper, where sizzling hot alien women and emotional sci-fi alien stories await you. If you enjoy thrilling adventures between humans and extraterrestrial beings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below the video. Now, let's dive into the story. The Nexus station hung like a silver jewel in orbit around Zorath, a planet shimmering with emerald seas and secrets older than the stars. The hum of machinery filled the air, a steady drone punctuated by the soft beeps of control panels, like the heartbeat of some vast, living beast. Max Carter stepped off the shuttle, his boots clanging against the polished metal floor. Tall, with tousled black hair and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, Max carried the kind of grin that could charm a pirate or disarm a diplomat. A former space marine turned xenoarchaeologist, he'd seen his share of battles, but now he chased relics instead of enemies. His arrival on Nexus was to lead a team into Zorath's ancient ruins, and the buzz of excitement followed him like a shadow. Scientists and engineers whispered as he passed, but Max's eyes locked onto one figure at the end of the corridor, Renie, the Vellari chief engineer. Her skin glowed like a ripe plum under the station's fluorescent lights, and her emerald eyes seemed to pierce right through you. Long, copper-red hair cascaded down her back, catching the light like molten fire. She wore a standard-issue jumpsuit, but somehow it hugged her curves in a way that made Max forget the station's artificial gravity for a second. Renie was pretending to inspect a control panel, her fingers dancing over the screen, but Max caught her stealing glances his way. "Gotcha," he thought, his grin widening. "Nice view," he muttered under his breath. And he wasn't talking about the planet outside the viewport. Max's first day on Nexus went south faster than a meteor. In the lab, surrounded by humming scanners and glowing artifacts, he reached for a crystalline relic, a fist-sized orb pulsing with strange light. "Let's see what you're hiding," he said, brushing his fingers against it. The orb flared, emitting a high-pitched screech that sent the lab into chaos. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and a nearby console sparked like a 4th of July firework. "Oh crap!" Max jumped back as engineers scrambled to contain the mess. Renie burst through the door, moving like a panther, her hair trailing behind her. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped, shoving past him to the main console. Her hands flew across the controls, rerouting power and silencing the alarms. Max leaned against the table, unfazed, his smirk firmly in place. "Just testing if this thing's the real deal," he said. Renie shot him a glare that could have melted steel, but the corner of her mouth twitched upward. "You're a walking disaster, Carter." As the system stabilized, Renie stepped closer to Max, close enough that he caught a whiff of her scent, something wild like alien wildflowers. "Next time, let me handle the artifacts," she said, her voice a mix of annoyance and something else, something that made Max's pulse kick up a notch. He tilted his head, letting his eyes linger on hers. "Deal, but only if you stick around to keep me in line." Renie rolled her eyes, but that faint smile betrayed her. She turned away, her hips swaying just a little more than necessary as she left the lab. Max watched her go, already planning his next move. This station's about to get a lot more interesting, he thought. The air on Zorath was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something sweeter, like overripe fruit from a world no human had ever walked. The shuttle's ramp hissed as it sealed shut behind the team, leaving Max, Renie, and 2 scientists, Dr. Patel and Technician Voss, standing at the edge of a jungle that pulsed with life. Trees towered overhead, their leaves glowing faintly like neon signs in a forgotten city, and strange, chirping calls echoed from the shadows. Max adjusted the strap of his gear pack, his eyes scanning the dense foliage. "All right, team," he said, his voice carrying the easy confidence of a man who'd faced worse than alien jungles. "Let's find that ruin and not get eaten by anything with too many teeth." Dr. Patel chuckled nervously, but Renie just rolled her eyes, her scanner already humming in her hands. "Keep up, Carter," she said, brushing past him. "I'm not dragging your ass out of a swamp." The path to the ruin was no stroll in the park. Vines as thick as pythons coiled across the ground, and every step seemed to stir up clouds of glittering pollen that made Max's nose itch. He led the way, hacking through undergrowth with a plasma cutter, while Renie stayed close, her scanner beeping as it mapped the terrain. The scientists trailed behind, muttering about soil samples and atmospheric readings. At one point, Max slipped on a patch of slick moss, his boots skidding toward a pool of bubbling, green sludge. Before he could curse, Renie's hand shot out, grabbing his arm and yanking him back. Her grip was strong, her fingers warm through his jacket. "Watch it," she said, her voice sharp but her eyes softer, like she was more worried than she'd admit. Max steadied himself, closer to her than he needed to be. "Thanks, darling," he said, flashing a grin. "Knew you'd have my back." Renie's cheeks flushed a deeper purple, and she let go like his arm was on fire. "Don't get used to it," she muttered, turning away, but Max caught the way her lips twitched, fighting a smile. They pushed deeper into the jungle, the air growing cooler as the sun dipped behind Zorath's jagged mountains. The scanner led them to a clearing where the ground dipped into a misty valley. Somewhere down there, hidden by fog and time, was the ruin, a massive structure of stone and metal that promised tech beyond anything the Nexus team had seen. Max crouched at the edge of the clearing, studying the descent. "Looks like a straight shot," he said, "but I'm betting this place has a few surprises." Renie knelt beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "The scanner's picking up energy signatures," she said, her voice low. "Old ones, but strong. If that ruin's got defenses, they're still active." Max turned to her, their faces inches apart. "Good thing I've got the best engineer in the galaxy to back me up." Renie met his gaze, her green eyes narrowing. "Flattery won't keep you alive, Carter." But her voice was softer now, and Max could have sworn she leaned in just a fraction before pulling back. Night fell fast on Zorath, and the team set up a small camp in the clearing, a portable heater casting a warm glow against the alien darkness. Dr. Patel and Voss were already snoring in their tents, exhausted from the trek, but Max and Renie sat by the heater, sharing a ration pack of protein bars. The jungle's chorus of clicks and hums filled the silence, but it was the kind of quiet that felt charged, like the air before a storm. Max broke off a piece of his bar and handed it to her. "So, what's the deal with the Vellari?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "You guys always this serious, or is it just you?" Renie took the bar, her fingers brushing his for a split second. "We're focused," she said, staring into the heater's glow. "Our culture values duty, precision. No room for distractions." Max leaned back on his elbows, watching her. "And what about you? Ever get tired of being so damn perfect?" She shot him a look, half annoyed, half amused. "I'm not perfect. And you're one to talk. Mister, let's touch the glowing artifact and blow up the station." Max laughed, the sound low and warm. "Fair point. But you didn't answer my question." Renie sighed, tucking a strand of copper hair behind her ear. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I wonder what it's like to let go." Her eyes flicked to his, and for a moment, the jungle, the mission, the whole damn universe faded away. Max felt his pulse kick up, the urge to close the distance between them almost overwhelming. "Careful," he said, his voice husky. "Letting go with me might get you in trouble." Renie's lips parted, like she was about to fire back, but then she caught herself, standing abruptly. "Get some sleep, Carter," she said, her tone brisk, but her cheeks betraying that telltale purple flush. "We've got a ruin to crack tomorrow." She disappeared into her tent, leaving Max staring after her, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Trouble's my middle name," he thought, and he had a feeling Renie was about to learn that firsthand. The fog in the valley clung to the team like a living thing, swirling around their boots as they descended toward the ruin. The air was colder now, sharp with the metallic tang of ancient stone and something else, something electric, like a storm waiting to break. Max led the way, his plasma cutter casting faint blue sparks as he cleared a path through tangled, glowing vines. Behind him, Renie's scanner hummed, its screen flickering with energy readings that grew stronger with every step. Dr. Patel and Voss followed, their voices hushed, as if the ruin itself was listening. The structure loomed ahead, a massive fortress of black stone and gleaming metal, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to pulse in time with Max's heartbeat. "This is it," he said, his voice low but steady. "Stay sharp, folks." Renie glanced at him, her green eyes catching the dim light. "You're the one who needs to stay sharp, Carter," she said, but there was a warmth in her tone that hadn't been there before. The entrance was a towering archway, its edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and time. Inside, the air was still, heavy with the weight of secrets. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, and the faint hum of dormant machinery buzzed just below hearing. Renie's scanner beeped urgently, and she held up a hand. "There's a power source ahead," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's active. We need to be careful." Max nodded, his hand resting on the grip of his utility knife. "Careful's my middle name," he said, flashing her a grin. Renie snorted, but her lips curved into a reluctant smile. "Sure it is." As they moved deeper, the corridor narrowed, forcing them closer together. Max could feel the heat of her body next to his, and every time their arms brushed, it sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with the ruin's energy. They reached a central chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow and its floor dominated by a massive, circular platform etched with more of those glowing symbols. At its center stood a console, its surface studded with crystal controls that pulsed faintly. "Jackpot," Max muttered, stepping forward. Renie grabbed his arm, her grip firm. "Don't touch anything," she warned, her voice tight. "Not until I've scanned it." Max raised his hands in mock surrender. "Yes, ma'am." She shot him a look, but didn't let go right away, her fingers lingering on his sleeve. For a second, their eyes locked, and Max saw something in her gaze, curiosity, maybe, or something hotter. Then Dr. Patel cleared his throat, and Renie pulled back, her cheeks flushing that telltale purple. While the scientists set up equipment to analyze the platform, Max and Renie worked on the console. It was a tangle of alien tech, wires and crystals woven together like a puzzle. Renie's hands moved with precision, her scanner guiding her as she traced circuits. Max crouched beside her, holding a light to illuminate the panel. "You're good at this," he said, genuinely impressed. "Ever think about ditching Nexus and running off to crack ruins full-time?" Renie didn't look up, but her lips quirked. "With you? I'd rather babysit a black hole." Max chuckled, leaning closer. "Ouch, but you're smiling, so I'll take it as a maybe." She shook her head, but the air between them felt charged, like the moment before a spark ignites. Then the console flared to life, its crystals glowing brighter. A low rumble shook the chamber, and the platform began to hum, sending a vibration through the floor. "What the hell?" Max said, grabbing Renie's arm as dust sifted from the ceiling. Her scanner screeched, and she cursed in Vellari, a melodic string of words that sounded like poetry and profanity all at once. "It's a defense system," she said, her voice urgent. "We triggered it." Before they could react, a hidden panel in the wall slid open, and a blast of icy air roared out, slamming into them. The chamber's temperature plummeted, and frost began to creep up the walls. Dr. Patel and Voss scrambled for cover, but Max and Renie were caught in the open, their breath clouding in the freezing air. "Move!" Max shouted, pulling Renie toward a narrow alcove near the console. They stumbled inside, barely fitting in a cramped space. The cold was brutal, biting through their jackets, and Max could feel Renie shivering against him. Without thinking, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close to share body heat. Her body pressed against his, soft and warm despite the chill, and he could feel her heartbeat racing under her jumpsuit. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, his breath warm against her ear. Renie nodded, her face inches from his. "Yeah," she whispered, but her voice was shaky, and her eyes were locked on his lips. The alcove was so tight they could barely move, every shift bringing them closer. Max's hand rested on her waist, and he felt her lean into him, just a fraction, her breath hitching. "This is your fault," she murmured, but there was no venom in it, only a spark of something that made Max's pulse pound. "Gotta keep you warm somehow," he said, his voice husky, and for a moment he thought she might close the gap between them. A loud clang from the chamber snapped them out of it. The platform's hum died down, and the icy blast stopped, leaving the air still and cold. Renie pulled back, her cheeks a vibrant purple, and Max let her go, though every part of him wanted to hold on. "Let's figure out what we tripped," she said, her voice unsteady as she stepped out of the alcove. Max followed, his grin back in place, but his mind still on the feel of her against him. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and Renie shot him a look that said she knew exactly what he was thinking. As they rejoined the team, the ruins' secrets loomed larger than ever, but so did the heat between them, simmering just below the surface. The chamber's icy chill lingered in Max's bones, but the heat of Renie's body against his in that cramped alcove still burned in his mind. The team regrouped around the glowing console, its crystals now dim but humming with latent power. Dr. Patel's scanner whirred as he analyzed the platform, muttering about energy signatures that could rewrite physics. Voss was busy cataloging the wall carvings, her flashlight dancing over symbols that seemed to shift when you weren't looking. Max and Renie stood shoulder to shoulder, their earlier moment hanging between them like an unspoken promise. "We need to access the core," Renie said, her voice steady but her eyes flicking to Max's with a spark of something more. "If this tech is what we think, it's a game changer." Max nodded, his grin back in place. "Then let's crack this thing open and make history. Or at least not blow ourselves up." Renie snorted, but her smile was real this time, warm and unguarded. The console was a beast, alien wiring tangled like a nest of snakes, crystals pulsing in patterns that made Max's head spin. Renie knelt beside it, her scanner guiding her hands as she probed the circuits. Max held the light, his eyes drifting from the tech to the curve of her neck, where a bead of sweat glistened under the faint glow. "Focus, Carter," she said without looking up, but her voice had a playful edge. "I'm focused," he replied, his tone low. "Just not on the wires." She shot him a look, her cheeks flushing purple, and Max felt that familiar jolt, like the universe was daring him to push further. Before he could, the console let out a sharp beep, and a holographic display flickered to life above it, projecting a map of the ruins' inner chambers. A single path led to a vault deep below, marked by a symbol that pulsed like a heartbeat. "That's our target," Renie said, her voice tight with excitement. "But the defenses are still active. We're walking into a trap." Max didn't hesitate. "Traps are my specialty. You in?" Renie met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "Try and stop me." They left Patel and Voss to monitor the chamber and headed for the vault, descending a spiral staircase carved into the stone. The air grew heavier, thick with the hum of unseen machinery. The walls were lined with more carvings, depicting creatures with too many limbs and eyes, their forms twisting in ways that made Max's skin crawl. Renie's scanner beeped erratically, and she cursed under her breath. "The energy's spiking," she said. "Whatever's down there, it's waking up." Max's hand hovered over his knife. "Good. I hate boring missions." Renie rolled her eyes, but her hand brushed his as they moved, and neither pulled away. The vault was a cavernous chamber, its ceiling studded with crystals that glowed like a starfield. At its center stood the prize, a metallic orb the size of a basketball, suspended in a web of energy beams that crackled with power. It was the gravity manipulator, a device that could bend space itself. Max let out a low whistle. "That's one hell of a find." Renie's scanner was going wild, her face lit by its glow. "It's fully charged," she said, her voice a mix of awe and caution. "But the system's locked. We need to disable the beams to get it." They split up, Max circling to a control panel on one side, while Renie worked another. The panels were a maze of levers and dials, each move risking a wrong step. Max yanked a lever, and the beams flickered but held. "Any luck?" he called. Renie's fingers danced over her panel. "Almost got it." The beams shut off, and the orb dropped into Max's waiting hands, heavier than it looked. But the ruin wasn't done with them. A deafening roar shook the vault, and the floor cracked, spitting sparks. Defense systems back online. Renie shouted, her scanner blaring. From the walls, panels slid open, revealing drones, sleek, spider-like machines with glowing red eyes. They skittered toward the team, their legs clicking against the stone. Max shoved the orb into his pack and drew his knife, its plasma edge flaring. "Stay behind me," he yelled, slashing at the nearest drone. It sparked and collapsed, but more were coming. Renie pulled a handheld disruptor from her belt, firing pulses that disabled 2 drones in a burst of static. "I don't need babysitting," she snapped, but her eyes were wide, adrenaline pumping. They fought back to back, Max's blade carving through metal while Renie's disruptor lit up the dark. A drone lunged at Max, its claw grazing his arm, and he grunted as blood seeped through his sleeve. Renie spun, blasting the drone to pieces. "You okay?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. "Never better," Max said through gritted teeth, but her concern hit him harder than the claw. The drones kept coming, and the vault was starting to crumble. Chunks of stone crashed from the ceiling, and a deep groan echoed, like the ruin itself was dying. "We need to move," Renie said, grabbing Max's hand. They sprinted for the exit, dodging debris and drones. A massive slab fell, blocking their path, and Max skidded to a stop, his arm around Renie's waist to keep her from falling. They were trapped, the air thick with dust and the hum of approaching drones. "This is bad," Renie said, her breath ragged. Max looked at her, her face smudged with dirt but more beautiful than ever. "Not if we're together," he said, his voice steady. She stared at him, her eyes softening, and for a heartbeat, the chaos faded. Then she nodded, squeezing his hand. "Let's do this." Renie's scanner pinpointed a weak spot in the slab, a crack they could exploit. Max jammed his knife into it, the plasma blade sizzling as it cut through stone. Renie rigged her disruptor to overload, tossing it at the crack. "Get down," she yelled. They dove behind a fallen pillar as the disruptor exploded, blasting the slab apart. The shock wave knocked them flat, and Max landed on top of Renie, their faces inches apart. Her breath was warm against his lips, her body soft beneath him. "You're heavier than you look," she whispered, but her hands gripped his shoulders, not pushing him away. Max's heart pounded, and he could have sworn hers was racing too. "In your trouble," he murmured, his voice rough. For a moment, they were still, the world reduced to the space between them. Then a drone's screech broke the spell, and Max pulled her up, the orb still secure in his pack. They scrambled through the gap, the vault collapsing behind them. The staircase was a gauntlet of falling rocks and sparking drones, but they moved as one, Max clearing the path while Renie covered their rear. When they finally burst into the main chamber, Patel and Voss were waiting, their faces pale. "You got it?" Patel asked, eyeing the pack. Max patted it, grinning despite the pain in his arm. "Damn right." Renie's hand brushed his, a silent check-in, and he gave her a nod. The ruin was still shaking, but they'd made it for now. As they headed for the surface, Max couldn't shake the feeling of her body against his, or the look in her eyes when she'd held him close. Whatever this ruin had in store, he knew one thing. He and Renie were in deeper than either of them had planned. The shuttle's engines roared as it broke through Zorath's atmosphere, carrying Max, Renie, and the team back to Nexus Station. The gravity manipulator, that shimmering orb of alien tech, sat secured in a containment unit, its faint glow a reminder of the hell they'd just survived. Max slumped in his seat, his arm bandaged where the drone's claw had sliced him, but his grin was as cocky as ever. Renie sat across from him, her copper hair a mess, her jumpsuit smudged with dust and soot. She looked exhausted, but her green eyes sparkled with something new. Pride, maybe, or something deeper. "You're staring, Carter," she said, her voice dry, but her lips twitching. Max leaned forward undeterred. "Can you blame me? You look like you just saved the galaxy." She rolled her eyes, but the purple flush creeping up her cheeks told him he'd hit the mark. Back on Nexus, the team was greeted like heroes. Scientists swarmed the orb, babbling about its potential to revolutionize space travel, maybe even bend gravity itself. Dr. Patel and Voss were already drafting reports, their voices buzzing with excitement. Max and Renie stood at the edge of the lab, watching the chaos unfold. His arm brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. "We did good down there," he said, his tone softer than usual. Renie nodded, her gaze fixed on the orb. "Yeah, but don't let it go to your head." Max chuckled, leaning closer. "Too late for that. I'm already planning our victory party." Her eyes flicked to his, a playful challenge in them. "As long as it's not in a collapsing ruin, I'm in." The celebration came later, in the station's mess hall, where the crew gathered under strings of flickering lights. Music pulsed through the speakers, a mix of human and Vellari beats that got everyone moving. Max, cleaned up and in a fresh jacket, found Renie by the viewport, staring out at Zorath's glowing curve. She wore a sleek, off-duty outfit that hugged her curves in a way that made Max's throat go dry. "Not dancing?" he asked, sliding up beside her. She sipped her drink, something blue and fizzy, and gave him a sidelong glance. "Not my thing." "You." Max grinned. "Only if I got the right partner." He held out a hand, and after a beat, she took it, her fingers warm against his. They didn't dance, not really, just stood there, hands clasped, the hum of the party fading as the space between them shrank. Renie's voice was quiet when she spoke. It's going to cause trouble, isn't it?" Max's thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Probably. You worry?" She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Not worried. Just, Vellari don't do this. Not with humans." Max stepped closer, his voice low. "Good thing I'm not just any human." Her lips parted, and before she could fire back, he leaned in, kissing her. It was slow at first, testing, but deepened fast, her hands sliding up his chest, his fingers tangling in her hair. The kiss was like Zorath's jungle, wild, electric, and a little dangerous. When they pulled apart, her breath was shaky, her cheeks a vivid purple. "You're impossible," she whispered, but she was smiling, and Max knew she didn't mean it. The next morning, they were summoned to the admin wing. Commander Vark, a stone-skinned Vellari with a voice like gravel, sat behind a desk, his eyes narrowing as he studied them. "Your stunt in the ruin was reckless," he said, tapping a tablet. "But that orb's a breakthrough." And he paused, his gaze flicking between them. "Your collaboration seems to have boosted morale." Max bit back a laugh, catching Renie's side eye. "We're keeping this off the record," Var continued, "but keep it discreet. And Carter, don't touch anything else that glows." Max saluted, grinning. "No promises, sir." Renie elbowed him, but her lips twitched. As they left, Max leaned in, whispering, "Told you we'd get away with it." She groaned, but her hand slipped into his, a quiet promise. Later, in Max's quarters, they stood by the viewport, Zorath's green glow painting their faces. Renie leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "So what now?" she asked, her voice soft. Max wrapped an arm around her, his grin softening. "Now, we keep chasing ruins, breaking rules, and driving each other crazy. Maybe find a planet with a beach for a change." She laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "You're on, Carter. But if you break anything, I'm leaving you in the jungle." He kissed her forehead, pulling her closer. "Deal. Long as you're there to drag me out." As Nexus hummed around them, prepping for the next mission, Max felt a certainty settle in his chest. The universe was big, dangerous, and full of secrets, but with Renie by his side, her fire, her strength, her trouble, he was ready for anything. The shuttle bays were already buzzing, new coordinates flashing on the screens. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, with a little chaos, a lot of heat, and a whole damn galaxy to explore.